Hello, dear chess fans. My name is Eugene Grinis. Welcome to my free chess school, from beginners to advanced, open for everyone who wants to improve own game. This video is intended for the beginners. The queen is the strongest piece. The queen has tremendous scope, especially in the open board. But it is important not to bring the queen out too early. If you do, you might find that your opponent is able to attack the queen and make it move again and again, often a clear waste of time. Let's look at the following game: e4, e5, queen h5. In this position, white has broken the rule and posted his queen very aggressively on just the second move of the game. At first glance, you might wonder why the move is so bad. After all, the queen attacks the undefended black pawn on e5, and you have to see this threat as black. The queen's move, however, offers black a simple way to develop effectively. First, black can defend the e5 pawn by developing the knight on b8 to c6. Knight c6, the best continuation. But not g6, attacking the queen, a huge mistake. This is exactly what white wanted. Queen takes pawn on e5 check, queen fork. The queen attacks not only the black's king on e8, but also the black's rook on h8. Queen e7, queen takes rook on h8, white has an extra rook. Knight c6, the best continuation. Bishop c4. White threatens mate in 1 on f7, and you have to see this threat as black. Since the e5 pawn is protected by knight, black can now advance the g pawn to g6, gaining time by attacking the queen and getting ready to develop the knight from g8 to f6, and probably the bishop from f8 to g7. g6. Queen f3. White threatens mate in 1 on f7, and you have to see this threat as black. Knight f6, developing the knight. Queen b3. This is already a huge mistake that has to be punished by black. Knight d4, attacking the queen. Bishop takes pawn on f7 check. King e7. Queen c4, protecting the bishop on f7 and the c2 pawn. But b5, attacking the queen. Now the queen can't protect the bishop anymore. queen c3. The bishop on f7 could be taken by the king, but black plays even stronger. Knight takes pawn on e4, attacking the queen. Queen d3, attacking the knight on e4. If queen e3, then follows knight takes pawn on c2 check, attacking the king, the queen, and the rook simultaneously. A knight family fork. King f1, knight takes queen on e3 check, pawn takes knight, and king takes bishop on f7. Black has the extra queen and wins. Knight takes pawn on e4, queen d3, attacking the knight on e4. Knight c5, attacking the queen. Queen c3. King takes bishop on f7, defending the knight on c5 with the bishop. Knight f3, developing the knight. Queen f6. Knight takes knight on d4. Pawn takes knight, attacking the queen. Queen h3. d5, attacking the queen with the bishop on c8. Queen g3. Bishop d6, developing the bishop and attacking the queen. Queen f3. Rook e8 check, developing the rook. King f1. Queen takes queen. Pawn takes queen on f3. Bishop h3 check. King g1, the only move. And now comes a punishment for all the previous white's play. Can you see it? Rook e1, checkmate. Don't develop your queen early. Most of the time you will want to develop your knights, bishops, and perhaps also your rooks before you bring out your queen. The queen is so valuable that it is difficult early on to be sure exactly where the queen belongs. If you advance your queen into the middle of the board, your opponent will have a chance to develop his knights, bishops, and rooks, and at the same time attack your queen. You will lose valuable development opportunities because you will have to move your queen over and over again, while your opponent will be properly developing many pieces. Rather than develop the queen too early, where it might be attached, and assist your opponent's development, try developing all your other pieces first. The following game was played in 1913 by the future world champion Alexander Alekhine as black. e4, e5, knight f3, developing the knight and attacking the e5 pawn. d6, defending the e pawn with the d6 pawn. This opening is called the Philidor defense. Bishop c4, developing the bishop. Knight c6, developing the knight. c3, preparing d2, d4. Bishop g4, pinning the knight. Queen b3, attacking the f7 pawn with the bishop and the queen. Queen d7. Knight g5, attacking the f7 pawn. Knight h6, defending the f7 pawn. In this position, White, who had targeted the points b7 and f7, came to the conclusion that the time was ripe for a tactical shot. He therefore continued. Bishop takes pawn on f7, check. Knight takes bishop. Knight takes knight on f7. Queen takes knight on f7, and queen takes pawn on b7, attacking the rook on a8 and the knight on c6. Queen fork. White has given up considerable material, but he is getting it back, and everything looked properly done. King d7, defending the knight and giving up the rook. Queen takes rook on a8. Queen c4. Suddenly, the aggressive white queen is out of play, while the black queen threatens mate in 1. f3, attacking the bishop. Bishop takes pawn on f3. Bishop sack. Pawn takes bishop. White has an extra rook. Knight d4. Knight sack. White played d3, attacking the queen. This is a huge tactical mistake. The chance was still there to save the game by returning the material. Pawn takes knight on d4, giving the bishop back. Queen takes bishop on c1, check. King e2, giving the rook back. Queen takes rook on h1. d5, with an equal position. d3 was played. Queen takes pawn on d3. Now pawn takes knight on d4. At worst, we find the queen shut out of play following a material gain. Often the hunter becomes to the prey in such instances, or else the queen becomes an important spectator. Bishop e7, sacrificing the rook on h8. Queen takes rook. And now follows mate in 1. Can you see it? Bishop h4, checkmate. So, what happened in this game and why was white mated in 15 moves? The answer has to do with white's opening development and the role of his queen. He developed two pieces to support the queen actions, then gave up both of them to win material. The result was that his queen strayed into the corner of the board, while his remaining pieces were standing in their initial positions. Many beginning players have never been told or simply don't believe that you shouldn't bring the queen out early. Let's look at the following game. e4, d5. This opening is called Scandinavian or central counter. You can play this opening, but only if you well know what to do. Pawn takes pawn on d5. Queen takes pawn on d5. In this position, black has developed the queen before bringing out any of the black knights, bishops or rooks. As a result, white has a very strong move, developing the knight on b1 to c3. The knight develops to a strong natural square and at the same time attacks the queen. Black must now be extremely careful. The queen, a much more valuable piece than the white knight, will have to move again. Queen e5 check. Black decides to move the queen to e5, giving check. Bishop e2. White responds to the check from the queen by developing the light squared bishop. Then, with white to move, white can bring out another piece, in this case the knight on g1 to f3, yet again attacking the black queen. Knight c6, developing the knight. Knight f3. As you can see, white is busy developing pieces actively, while black is forced to make moves again and again with the queen, as it is under attack. Queen c5. d4. The d4 pawn is covered by a white knight and queen. That's why it is safe for white to move the pawn, attacking the black's queen. Queen b6. d5. Attacking the knight on c6. Knight b4. White castles, bringing his king to safety. The d5 and the c2 pawns are well protected. Queen g6. Black is in love with moving the queen. He attacks the c2 pawn with the knight and the queen, since only white's queen protects the pawn. Knight e5. White decides to attack black's queen, giving up the c2 pawn. White has a number of pieces in the game, while black has only 2 pieces developed, and his king is still stuck in the middle. Queen takes pawn on c2. Black wins a pawn. He expects white capturing on c2. But bishop b5 check. White ignores the queen on c2. If king d8, then it follows mate in 1. Can you see it? Knight takes pawn on f7. Checkmate. Bishop b5 check. After bishop d7, black loses a whole piece, since white has 2 pieces attacking the d7 square, while black has only 1 piece, the king, covering this square. It follows bishop takes bishop on d7, check, king d8, queen g4. The best continuation, attacking the knight on b4 and threatening mate in 1 after knight takes pawn on f7. White is winning. Bishop b5 check. c6, attacking the bishop. Pawn takes pawn on c6. Queen takes queen on d1. Black decides to get rid of the queens. After pawn takes pawn on c6, follows bishop takes c6 check, bishop fork, knight takes bishop on c6, queen takes now unprotected queen on c2. Knight takes knight on e5, queen e4, queen fork. White wins. Queen takes queen. Pawn takes pawn on b7 check. White ignores the queen. Pawn fork. If king to d8, then rook takes queen check, king c7, pawn takes rook, queening. White wins. Pawn takes pawn on b7 check. Bishop d7 was played. Now white wins immediately. Can you see how? It is made in 1. Pawn takes rook, queening, check, mate. You can never be too careful with the queen. When thinking about your opponent's queen, always check twice to make sure that there is not a fork hiding somewhere. And when thinking about your own queen, look to see whether an opportunity for a queen fork might be present. Because the queen combines the power of the rook and the bishop, it can attack two or more pieces from almost any square of the board. Let's take a look at this position. This is an example of how the ability of the queen to combine the rook's move and the bishop's move makes it such a dangerous piece. Black decides to play knight g5, but this is a huge mistake. White plays queen d8 check, forking the king and the knight. Black must defend against the check, king h7, and then white wins the knight. Queen takes knight on g5. White is winning. Here's another example of a queen fork. In this position, black wants to develop the bishop. A good move would be bishop e6, putting the bishop on a good diagonal in front of the king. However, black plays bishop to b7, a huge mistake. White answers with queen b3 check, forking the bishop and the king. Black must defend against the check, which will leave the bishop unprotected. Notice that blocking the check with the bishop, playing bishop d5, fails to save the bishop because white can safely capture the bishop with the knight or with the queen. Queen takes queen, knight takes queen on d5, winning with an extra piece. Queen b3 check, king h8, queen takes bishop on b7, and white is a piece up. The queen moves like the rook and the bishop, so it can pin like the rook and the bishop, along ranks, files, and diagonals. In this position, white plays queen e3. With this move, he pins the knight to the rook, and black loses a piece. He can do nothing against the queen pin. Rook a8, queen takes knight on c5, and white is a piece up. Because the queen is so powerful, if your opponent is able to protect the piece that is pinned, you won't want to capture it with the queen. But that doesn't stop you from attacking the piece with something else, perhaps even a lonely pawn. In this position, white pins the rook to the king and goes for it, goes after it. b4, threatening b5, winning the rook, which can't move. a6. This doesn't help black. b5. Pawn takes pawn. Pawn takes pawn on b5. Queen d7. Rook f6. Pawn takes rook on c6 check also wins. For example, queen takes pawn, queen takes queen check, king takes queen, rook f7, h5, rook f6 check, king d5, rook takes pawn on g6, b5, rook g5 check, king c4, h4, c5, rook takes pawn on h5, b4, and now rook takes pawn on c5 check. The best move in this position. Rook sack. King takes rook. Pawn takes pawn on b4 check. King takes pawn on b4 and h5. The passed pawn can't be stopped. King c5, h6, king d6, h7. White is winning. Queen d7, rook f6, a good move. King b8, pawn takes rook on c6. The game is over. Okay, that's the lesson for today from the Eugene Grinis chess school. I hope it was useful and you enjoyed it. If so, push likes, subscribe to my YouTube channel and leave comments. Goodbye.